Hello my beautiful co-creators, Lilou here in California, in San Francisco actually, and today I'm with Robert Williams. Hello.
Hello.
Good to be with you, good to have met you today.
My pleasure.
I love the synchronicities again that led me to meet this man on a Juicy tour through Bob Zimmer, which then I previously met through Dr. Larry Dossey, and to have met you and have been in this conversation today has made a profound impact in my life, and I really feel blessed right now to be sharing the information that you shared with us this afternoon now with as many people as possible, so thank you for that. Just on a technical level, or if we can put a title to ourselves, you are actually the CEO of Clarus.
I'm
the co-founder,
one of the founders, yes.
And but what I really want to share right now with the world and as many people as possible is your view of humanity, and how do you actually look at humanity, because this is such a beautiful analogy that you have. I think like all of us, we can understand it in such a beautiful way, so tell us.
Yeah, well
it's a big question.
First of all, you know, you and I are speaking right now, and there are people that later on will be watching. And where's the camera? And so I'm looking into a future event. Somebody's watching us on your website. And yet at the same time, there is a place in consciousness that is beyond and more fundamental than time. And there's an interesting paradox happening these days, and that is we live life from moment to moment, and we see things growing, changing, diversifying, growing, changing, diversifying. And at the same time, there is something that is blossoming in our hearts that is timeless, that's always been there, always will be there, and is here now, always. And that is a reality now. It's no longer a metaphysical concept. It's becoming a reality for a lot of people. And more people that perhaps will be watching your show will begin to understand, not with the words that we're using to talk to each other, but with something even more fundamental than that. And it's not about you as an individual or me as an individual. It's about something in the collective that's beginning to wake up, that's beginning to, like you and I and all humans, we go through our different states of consciousness. We go to sleep and there's no consciousness, there's no reality. And then we dream, and then there's a reality that has to do with our subconscious and these images that come to us in our dreams. And then we wake up in this waking consciousness. And that state of consciousness then begins to perceive reality, and perceive reality in a sense based on the state of wakefulness, the state of how aware we are. So if we wake up from a difficult night and we're not well rested, we see things a little bit foggy. We're not as perceptive. So we can see that there are relatives, we can become more alive if we have a better night's sleep, if we eat better foods perhaps, and we can become more alive also just by being in a community of people who are already more alive. And that quality that I call more aliveness, or that I'm right now saying is more alive, is already there. Just like when we were in deep sleep. The quality or the ability to perceive was already there, but it was latent and wasn't active. We were unconscious. Dream and then wakefulness. So my perception or my experience of what's happening in all of our lives is we are becoming more and more awake. We are becoming more able to perceive ourselves interacting with each other. And there is a quality of the heart that's becoming more apparent. Now what does that mean? The heart. It's often referenced in all kinds of poetry and music because it transcends the mind. When we perceive something with our hearts, we hear sounds, we can read a book, but our hearts are more fundamental. We feel something more expanded than our own bodies even, than our own minds. When we love our children, our hearts are activated. There's no reason really to love each other. There's no reason really to love our children intellectually. Why do we love a child? Why, when that infant is crying, do we go to it? It seems silly to even ask the question. But intellectually, there's, what are we going to get from nurturing that child? Mm-hmm. What's in it for us? Any child, any person, unless we're right at that level of complete starvation or our survival is really threatened, if we're just even stable to a small degree, we will give to a child, we'll give to an infant who is in need. It's built into our system. And that is an example of how the heart interacts with the world. Mm-hmm. It perceives an avenue of giving, an avenue of love that feels quite natural. Mm-hmm. And what I feel is happening in humanity is a greater capacity to love and to give, mm-hmm. and to rejoice in our commonalities, mm-hmm. as opposed to the things that separate us or the things that make us individual. So there's, like I say, there's these words that we're using. There are people that are watching your show, and then there's something timeless that hopefully they will begin to realize in their daily lives. And that's one of the purposes of this organization that we're starting, and that is to create a vehicle for people to reference when it comes to what the heart is all about, practical solutions to everyday problems, practical actions we can take that are real and that has been shown to increase the quality of life. So it's not just airy-fairy, lovey-dovey. It's things that we can really do to enjoy life more. Mm-hmm.
And that's what you call the field?
Yeah, fields. Yeah, fields. It's a research alliance, and it's a community of individuals who believe that we can make a change with technology, information, and communities that we can make a change for our next highest level of life, mm-hmm. to become more alive together. And so the quality of aliveness, we have all these different disciplines that can resonate with that. In other words, what we eat, how we interact with each other, what we do from day to day, how we fuel our vehicles, how we power our houses. All those things can be unified in a very simple way with a concept of fields. Mm-hmm. A concept of fields. Fields is a concept of something that is linking everything else. And it's also an area of quantum mechanics and quantum physics that it accepts the idea that there is a fundamental way that information is exchanged between particles, and that fundamental way is via a field. Mm-hmm. It's via a field.
And that field and that connection and that linkage to this field enables us to be closer to the divine and have higher intelligence that actually guides us through life, where we can live in a more harmonious and harmonic way with things around us in nature, so that life is actually juicier?
Yeah.
Is that what we're talking about?
Well,
here?
that's it, because what do we really learn that establishes a quality of happiness? You know, happiness cannot be learned. Happiness is realized. Yeah. Happiness is realized. And the realization of happiness, the realization of love, the realization of wholeness happens often when we least expect it. but it, like you say the divine. That's the one way to define that great mystery, that great supremeness of
that's something.
That's
out
something.
There that
something.
Is beyond our comprehension.
Yeah.
That is big and governing everything. No.
Right. It's a source of newness. It's a source of new ideas, and it's also a source of energy. So connection to our divine self is connection to our life force. Yeah. Connection to our higher source of wisdom and intuition, our higher source of solutions to problems. Our higher self, even Einstein, and most innovative scientists, innovative people, have encountered what they call that mysterious spot in their consciousness that just gives them the answers. It's not like working out an algebraic problem and then coming up with a solution. So Einstein would have a certain problem he was trying to solve, a certain mystery that he was trying to understand of the universe, and he would lay down his chalkboard, or his chalk at the chalkboard where he used to do his equations, and go out and play his violin while on his sailboat. Mm. Now, that's a technique that he used to go beyond the mind. And it gets into the influence of music. But so he would go out there and just play, and then boom, it would come to him. Now, how many of us have experienced that? We all have. Mm-hmm. We're walking down the street, we're not even thinking of some problem we have, and boom, the answer comes. Mm-hmm. So there's an example of connection to the divine, or connection to our higher potential. Mm-hmm. And the connection is effortless. Mm-hmm. Once the environmental conditions, once we're in that right zone, that those revelations occur. Yeah. And by the way, once we have those revelations, our life force increases because it's one with life force. We are energized. We go, aha! Just that aha. Our eyes are, at that moment, we're more alive.
Yeah, and everything seems to be larger and we have more space to live. How do you explain that on a scientific or field level?
It can be measured, and it's not within the domain of conventional science, mm-hmm. but I'll give you an example, and that is, let's say we're at a concert and the musicians are really good, but we start out, we feel ourselves, we feel our individuality, we might feel our friends next to us like this, and we're in that field of energy, and we feel ourselves. And then something happens in the music, and we feel expanded. We actually feel less of our individual boundaries, mm-hmm. and more of a collective boundary, if you will. And so that is actually a real phenomenon that has been scientifically validated. What happens in an environment where there's an increase of life force, like for instance, this could be at a musical concert, and it could be any kind of music, but mm-hmm. we get we have that, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Mm. We're not thinking of tick, tick, tick time, the concert's 15 minutes into it, or it's almost over. We're not thinking, oh, I'm here and that the musicians are there and my friends are here. Mm-hmm. We actually transcend that, but we include it. Mm-hmm. We don't lose our bodies, but our bodies become part of a collective phenomenon. And they've done some research to show that heart rate variability in individuals in a concert situation, or the ability of the body to perform more efficiently increases in that state. Mm-hmm. So once that zone, once that magic begins in the concert, people's physiologies actually change. And how do they change? They become more efficient. And nobody ate any different food, people were just there. They started the concert, they started at a certain state of consciousness, and then it expanded. And so that word expansion is real. And the whole idea of the field is that there really are no solid boundaries. Mm-hmm. real quickly to think about who we are. Okay, here's our bodies, then we have the organs, then we have the cells, then we have the molecules, then we have the atoms. And when you look at the atom, we're all made up of atoms and even more fundamental particles, but let's just stop at the atom. If we were to take one atom, let's say a hydrogen atom, which has a nucleus and an electron, and we were to expand it so that the nucleus is the size of a golf ball, and we put it on the pitcher's mount of a baseball stadium. We have baseball in the United States. We put it on the pitcher's mount, the electron would be like a little gnat out in the bleachers. So what's in between? That is a field. It's a field. There's no particles. And even when they have taken nuclei and broken them apart, there's fields that connect the subatomic particles and on like that. So literally, we are sharing fields of energy, fields of information. Our bodies are separated through universal laws of electromagnetism. And so this is actually mostly space, but because of electromagnetism and other laws, it feels like there's a solidity that can't be penetrated. But our consciousness actually can expand out beyond our physical bodies. And that's like in the concert, that's like in group events where we just feel this group energy. And it could even be for a cause, a common cause, something, it could even be negative, something like 9/11
That's what I was thinking.
united
Tell
us.
us about that experience actually on 9/11 and how people knew before it happened, or they detected something on the computer.
Yeah, first of all, but we all remember the horrifying event. And there's an example of something that actually, in an ironic way, unified us. Because when you're watching the TV, or even if you were at New York, you're not thinking too much. You're just like, oh my God, oh, what is this? What is happening? So the mind was confused at that point. We didn't know how to file this in our past experience. And so our hearts actually opened up because of that, and we became closer to each other as an odd side effect of this event. Humanity felt together again because of a common event that was greater than ourselves. So there are scientists that have machines that measure the ambient noise of different fields on the planet Earth. And it's very technical, but anybody who's interested, you can go to Dean Radin's book, R-A-D-I-N, and he talks about these random number generators. And I won't go into how they work, but basically, if it records just what's happening in the ambient energy around the planet. And if there's a huge fluctuation, it will show a change in the graph. Now, what they found was that with events like the OJ trial, when everybody was looking at their TV, wondering whether OJ was going to be found guilty or innocent, there was a change in this ambient background noise or background energy. And so these machines began to move all over the world. And what was found during, we could say during 9/11, they found that certainly those machines changed radically. There was a big change. Now the theory is, from Dr. Radin and others, is that our consciousness is affecting the fundamental function of energy, or the fundamental movement of energy, background energy on planet Earth. Our consciousness affects that. Our consciousness, how we are interacting with each other, how we are interacting with ourselves, but something greater than our physical bodies. And what they found is, was during 9/11, the machines were going way off the chart. So obviously everybody was watching their TVs. But in further research, they actually found that the machines began going off their baseline 4 hours
Yeah.
before the event. So 4 hours before the actual moment of the 9/11 catastrophe, something in our collective intuition was active. Something was happening. Much like mother's intuition. I'm a parent, and I know now with a daughter that you have this sense, and you just feel maybe something's wrong. I don't know how many times I've awakened and gone in the other room and found my daughter tossing and turning, and she's not comfortable. And even more so, my wife as a mother. So parents know, and we all know, we just get this intuition, or we feel like,
Those premonitions.
oh, I'm thinking of a friend, boom, they call on the telephone. So that is a function of the field. We're asking about the field.
Yeah.
You see how much greater it is than just...
And how much more knowledge we access to beyond
Absolutely.
our brain comprehension, intellectual comprehension.
Exactly.
And that's where really the future lies, isn't it? Into opening up to this field where infinite possibilities, infinite creations, beautiful things can arise and change our planet and help us transform, isn't it? And raise the frequency on this planet. Anything is possible from this place.
Well, exactly. The first of all, the idea of fields is a way of communication. It's a medium of information exchange.
Yeah.
Now, it's like saying water. You can have polluted water, you can have crystal clean water. And so we have this concept of the field that connects us all. Now, what we do is communicated in the field. So there's the theory that what we are doing as a community, so the viewers of your show are all individually watching, but at the same time, there is something happening through the field. And it's way beyond the mind. You know, to say, well, I know exactly what's going to happen now because I've participated in this, listening and watching this show. But the idea is that if we are using a higher state of our potential, even in our own silent moments, even in our own state of self-awareness, then that affects the field in certain discrete ways that allows other people to access that same or a similar state of higher awareness. And very much like good music, and I say good music, that could be any music, well, with exceptions, but music that is that carries some higher degree of beauty and truth, and that gets into the discussion of what frequencies are, what relationships are. Two notes have a relationship to each other. There's rhythms that go into it. And so you have...
Where was their place of creation also? Where that music was created from?
Well,
which
most importantly.
Yeah.
So that gets into two piano players can play exactly the same, and one can move you to tears, and the other say, well, that's pretty good. Why? Because one person was playing the same notes, but was giving more to that moment of musical creation.
Yeah.
Giving more. Musicians know this. You get into the zone, and you've gotten to an area of magic, it feels like, because you're not thinking.
Yeah.
You're just there, almost witness, but often just feeling this bliss, this beauty, and people then perceive that. It's not just the acoustic impressions on our eardrums. It's not just the A minor seventh. I'm a musician, so I know music. You know, you go through a series of ratio changes and rhythmic changes, and you can analyze that and look at it analytically. It's all notes, acoustic impressions on the ears, and rhythms. But greater than that is that consciousness that can be transmitted through the music, with the music. And that's what a live performance is so good at, you know? And that's what sometimes gets lost in the recording process, which is a different part of the conversation.
But this is accessible to all of us, not just musicians. I feel that from the moment
Absolutely.
we do what
Yes.
On a soul level, then anybody is impacted by that. Like right now, this interview, you know, or for somebody that is playing a tennis game fully in the flow and in tune, I feel other people watching get that vibration and access to this field through them.
Lilou, I'd like to give you an analogy, and that is where we are at as a species of humans.
Yeah.
The universe works in cycles. You know, we have the 4 seasons, we have the 24 hours in one day, wakefulness, sleep. There's changes that happen in a periodic way. You know, and so, for instance, you take a seed. Let's think of a rose seed, a rose bush seed, and that has a certain molecular structure, and it's very stable. You know, it's mostly carbon and some other molecules, and you put that in the soil, and one magical moment, that seed changes its basic structure. It goes through what we call a phase transition. So now the brown seed, which is carbon and some other minerals, now transforms into this sprout. And there's an intelligence there that was active in not only the maintenance of the seed and what was going on at a very much slowed down level compared to the sprout. Because you look at the seed, literally, you don't see much change. And then the sprout, you know, in a couple days, there's a tremendous amount of change, very, very quickly. And so then the sprout then intrinsically has the intelligence, the innate intelligence, to know which way is the sun. It doesn't start growing down, it goes up, right? We never think about it. That's the innate intelligence. That's also what we can say is our greater potential. It's built in. It's not something that we can learn so much. We can learn about it, but to experience it and to have it reveal itself is a process of our aliveness. And so the sprout then seeks the sun and bursts through the top of the soil, and then when it receives the sunlight, that activates another phase transition, and so the shell or the place around that tender sprout begins to harden, and so the stem then is expressed. And then there's another transition or another phase transition into the leaf. Now I want to mention here that this is not an analogy, but literally when they look at how plants grow, there are phases of stability. For instance, let's just start with the sprout. And then there's an increase of chaos at the cellular level. So the cells no longer look so orderly. They look very chaotic, and if you were to look at it under a microscope and just not know that the sprout is becoming a stem, then you might think there's something wrong, because there's a greater amount of chaos. But then that chaos gives way to a higher state of order. And so in this case, it goes from the stem to the leaf, and the stem to the thorn, and the plant continues to grow like that. Areas or phases of stability, and then massive change. Stability, chaos, disorder, massive change, higher state of order. This is something that we find in nature all the time. And right before, this has literally been shown, right before the rose blossoms out, the actual flower of the rose, it's all the rose, right? Rose bush. The actual flower blossoms out is the greatest amount of chaos at the level of the cells. So the cells, some of them die, sap comes down and goes back into the earth, and there's a high degree of disorder, and yet from that high degree of disorder, this intelligence creates the rose flower. And we see a complete new form, a new structure that's certainly unlike the stem, the leaf, the sprout, the seed. It doesn't even look similar. It's completely changed, but of the same essence.
Yeah.
So this happens, farmers know it happens through a cycle. You plant the seed, you go through the certain different cycles, and you aid in that natural process. Okay, now the spout's up, certain water, certain fertilizer. We can aid, but we can't really control it. We can enable it, we can enhance the process, we can nurture it, but it has its own intelligence. Now, this is what I strongly believe is happening to humanity. Humanity has gone through certain phases of expression, certain phases of reality, certain phases of aliveness. So we can say certain phases have been found to be stable, and then there's an increase of chaos, and then what's emerging from that chaos is what I believe a higher potential of humanity. And this is the golden moment of aliveness that we can participate in. And we don't have to participate in it. That's the free will we have, you know? Nothing is forced upon us. There are certain things, you could say laws of nature. Earthquake happens and you know, we don't have any control over that perhaps. But there are things that we can actually choose to participate with if we know that they're happening. There is an abundance of evidence that is pointing to a direction of mass transformation on the planet. Mass, that means all people, all of us, all humans are going to experience a transformation of themselves to whatever degree we don't really know at this point. But the indicators are there. And so even
chaos right now that we're going through is an indicator of that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so if we look at the ancient texts or the wisdom of the ages, we can find that there are indicators that precede a higher state of life. The indicators are happening right now, which is a chaotic effect on all the existing systems of our lives. The economic system, the system of social systems, the communication systems, the energy systems. There are forces, we could say, or influences. What I believe is it's intrinsic in this field of intelligence that we all live in, like the ocean, and we're all fish in this huge ocean. And it's like that, we're so enmeshed with this field of information and energy and potential that we don't even know it exists. Like you know, where's the water for a fish? It's just always been in there. But the water can change, and when the water changes, the fish realizes it and has to adjust, right? And there are some fish who actually go through a transformation when the currents change, and that signals how and when they are going to become something different. So back to humanity. There are indications now that there's a golden opportunity to join and participate in something that's automatically happening. The automatic part is that those information frequencies or ratios of dynamic energy, similarly to those ratios of dynamic energy that form the blueprint of the flowering rose, are forming the blueprint of a higher state of consciousness, a higher state of aliveness with humanity. So the blueprint's being established. Now, will we be able to honor the blueprint and participate and be part of this new expression of humanity, or will we not? So it is a opportunity, and it's not an automatic process, and that gets into whether we have free will or not. But I believe we do have a little bit of free will, and that we can choose to recognize this higher state of consciousness, and that's where we place our attention.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you, because in the middle of this, where do we stand, and where do we have to tell each other or tell ourselves?
Yeah. So right now, you and I have a choice. Let's say after this interview, we can put our attention on all the bad things that are happening on the planet, and that's legitimate. We are concerned. We want to make sure it's safe out there in the streets of San Francisco, so we can watch the news. We can do that for how long? How long do we need to do that, right? So that's our choice. We can watch the news for the next 7 hours and become overshadowed with all the negativity. This is just an example of how we can choose to place our attention. We can watch the news and see that it's safe outside and look outside and actually go out into the sun and take a walk. Now, wonder what's going to be more life-supporting for our bodies. It's sunny out in San Francisco now. It's warm. So we take a walk out in the sun, there's trees out there, or we watch the news for 7 hours. It's silly. We know that walking out in nature, walking out in clean air and under the sunlight is going to be better for us. But we have to make that choice, right? We have to remind each other. Yeah. So there's an example of higher states of consciousness, because if you're in a particular state of consciousness, you don't recognize that there's a choice. And you just are wrapped up in the day-to-day patterning, habitual patterning of your life. And you don't even think that you have a choice. So the first next highest level of consciousness is you actually have a choice. Even in these small moments, maybe you do work very hard 9-10 hours a day. But what about these little moments between little actions? There's always pauses. There's always space between the words, between our thoughts, between our feelings, or beyond our feelings. There's always something there that we can become aware of and activate. So, are we going to watch the news? If we can't go outside, if it's storming outside, where are our thoughts going? What are we going to think about? Are we going to think about all the horrible things that are happening, or the pains that we have in our bodies, or the misery that we have experienced in our life, and we all have? Or are we going to think about and put our attention on something that's beautiful?
So love,
something
or fear.
that
Choose.
is loving. Something that is in that place where we can more naturally be alive. In that place that's inviting us to be alive, right? So the second or third phase is actually to consciously engage into where our attention goes. And one of the things that Fields Research Alliance and what you're doing is giving people is a place for their attention. It's a home for the attention. And so we watch your show and we get inspiration. That inspiration then affects our heart rate, affects our brain waves, affects every aspect of our life. Then we get more opportunities to live life in a slightly different way, a better way perhaps. And then we forget, we go back to sleep. We can watch your show again. We can use things that have been shown to raise consciousness, and we can choose to talk in ways that are uplifting. These little things have huge effects. So there's just a couple examples.
Wonderful. And this is part one. I want to say right now, this is part one of this interview, and unfortunately we're gonna have to. I'm running to another interview, and that I'm so excited also about, and I want to continue this conversation with you very, very soon, because you had some near-death experience. You were a magician. You totally shifted your life. You created something amazing. All of that and more I want to talk about in part two. We have to make this time this week, or sometimes while the Juicy Tour is around.
All right.
You are
Let's
awesome. Thank you for your inspiration.
Thank you. And thanks for your audience. Thanks for everybody that's watching. This is an important...
This is juicy.
Yeah.
This is important.
It's time for the juice. It is time for juice.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, big time. It's time for all this greatness to emerge, and that we allow ourselves to lift to live our best potential and our best possibility.
Yeah.
You know, for this emergence of something beautiful on the planet, for whole humanity, for the entire universe.
Believe me, it's real.
Important times.
Yeah. So maybe if we have time, the next interview, I can talk about my experience, because it's real.
Yes.
And not only saved my life and created miracles that are absolutely real, but it also gave me some information on how I could share that with people.
And we'll talk about your downloads, your vision, and all of that. This is so precious. Thank you for this moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Lilou.
Much love, my beautiful co-creator. I guess there's going to be a part two. Bye.